Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. My guest today is Christie Garcia, and she is a leadership coach, speaker, facilitator, contributor to Forbes' Coach Council, and founder of Mindful Choice Leadership Academy. She has 19 years of experience in sales, recruiting, and leadership development. And for the last decade, she has worked with current and upcoming leaders from fast-growing organizations, including Airbnb, Twitter, Movement for Life, Sunrun, and Oakley. Christie builds programs that help individuals and teams maximize their impact through self-awareness, ownership, communication, alignment, and accountability. Christie's superpowers is helping her clients identify and manage their ego in real time. As a business owner, wife, and mother, you've learned that there are always challenges in life, Christie, and business as well. How do you keep your mindset present and manage your ego so that you can face each one with the least amount of resistance and drama? Let's get started with that question.
Well, that's a big question. I think if I had the perfect answer, I'd have life figured out and I'd be living like Gandhi, right? Unfortunately, I have not mastered that skill, but I think the number one thing that I try to do is, like you said, stay present, breathe, slow down. I'm one of those people that move fast, think fast, and works fast when I am stressed and overwhelmed. And that's usually my indicator that my ego is running my show. I have a little more of that unconscious behavior going on, not really paying attention to what I'm doing, just going through the motions, trying to control as many things as I control so a ball doesn't drop. And that is that's the energy that typically gets me to where I'm sabotaging either my good intentions, forgetting that there's people involved, and just focusing on the task. So slow down. I think that's my biggest indicator. Slow down, breathe, and be conscious of my next move.
All right. Well, great. That's a good way to kick off the show. So ego management, that's a interesting positioning in the business world to come out and say, like, this is what I do. How did you get started on this career path?
I started out with just the title, leadership development, helping, communication, all the fun things. And really, as my business expanded over the last 13 years, it really evolved to the number one thing that I work with people on is identifying what are those ego tactics that sabotage their good leadership. Yes, there's communication involved. Yes, there's self-awareness involved. Yes, there's delegation involved, and all the things that we all do. But really, ultimately, if you don't learn to manage your ego, it doesn't matter what you do, what books you read, what classes you take, you will never be able to overcome these unconscious weaknesses and behaviors and mindsets that just hold us back from being our best self. Again, they're called unconscious because we're not even aware of them. So unless you have someone helping you, one, identify them and point them out in real time, it's really hard for you to ever master them and take control of them. So, over the last, 7 or 8 years, I started shifting to ego management. That's the work we do. And being able to do it in an organization from the top down really is such a great way to transform teams quickly. Self-awareness, everybody thinks they're aware until you start pointing out the really deep unconscious things. And that's when in about week 3 to 6 of the program, you start to see teams going, whoa, I get it. It's not just Sally that's, unpredictable or too aggressive in meetings. I actually trigger her. And this is my part that I play. And this is where I can change, how I show up. So
how do you facilitate that in a team meeting? And this is a 2-part question, I guess. Maybe let's start with, how do you create a safe environment in a room that allows for you to facilitate a conversation and get to that place where people are owning their ego issues?
Such a great question. I think the number one thing is normalize the ego. We all have one. We can all be a jerk sometimes, and so I think the second you start to just talk about the traditional ego tactics, being aggressive when someone calls you out on your stuff, being passive aggressive when you don't want to disrupt something, or when someone, you take, and all of a sudden you can't take anymore. So now you're aggressively attacking people. Maybe you're just shutting down and you're sitting in the room quietly, even though you disagree and you have value to add. Those are all ego tactics. Micromanagement, not delegating, being too busy that you are not in control of your time. Those are ego tactics. And so when we just start to talk about the normal behaviors that we all do at both work and home, you start to say, oh, wow, I do have an ego too. And most of the time when we're talking ego in just everyday life, we think of ego as bad. It's the jerk in the room. It's the aggressive person. There's the narcissist in the room. At the end of the day, we all have an ego. And when we can accept that, now no one is bad for their ego. We can actually learn to work with it. We can learn to manage it. We can call it out as a team without it getting someone defensive or putting them off guard, but because they're aware of it now too. So it really starts to just open up a conversation that brings the humans back to business. We're sitting at a table full of people instead of roles. And I think when you can do that, you just start having completely different conversations. The energy changes, and the truth starts to come out in a way that is productive and helpful, instead of, again, pushing our agenda to make our groups, work easier and not thinking about the agenda of, let's say, the sales department. So it really just makes everybody slow down, think more effectively, work together more productively, and open up communication that's never been had.
Right. So as a coach, I'm really big on having a framework, and I imagine you probably have a framework too. And I imagine there's a framework for teaching people about the different types of egos, how to identify them. What is that framework, if it exists? And lay it out for us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I built the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy, and obviously that's where the framework lives. Step 1, self-awareness. Self-awareness is the key to all of it. If you are not aware of what you do, you cannot change what you do. And so we start with self-awareness. Again, most people think they're aware. When you talk to most leaders, like, oh yeah, I know I do that. It's like, well, just because you do something, do you actually know when you're doing it, how it looks, what the impact is, what it's creating in your level of success? That's the part that's way deeper than most people ever go with, like, oh yeah, I know I do that. I know I can, shut down in a meeting. I know I can micromanage sometimes. And we kind of blow it off as like, no big deal. And that's not real self-awareness. That's just saying, yeah, I've been told I have a weakness and I don't like it. So yeah, I know I have it. We take it to a whole nother level of self-awareness. We actually have a 360 tool that really helps understand our current impact. What is the impact you think you're having in your team and the world around you? And what's the actual impact? Because that's usually where the ego starts to show up, right? It's the gaps of perception. I always tell people, perception is not truth, but it is reality. And if you are not matching the perception that you want to be making, then the perception of what people are receiving is exactly how they're taking you on. And so being able to be aware of your current impact. Did that land how I wanted it to land? Or did I just shut down everybody in the room? Did that land how I wanted to land? Or did I just come across as too aggressive and controlling that no one felt that they could give me any form of feedback or insight or wisdom into what they had to share around the topic or situation. Maybe it was the opposite. Maybe it's like, oh, I came in too wishy-washy, too uncommitted to my plan, and I just kind of threw it out there and said, okay, go run with it. And now no one knows what to do. Those are all ego tactics of lack of awareness of your impact. That impact didn't land, whether it was the aggressor or whether it was the passiveness, it didn't land, and it's not going to get the results that you are intentionally wanting. And so again, matching the impact, matching the perception is really where self-awareness can start to help you succeed and get your team all aligned, all accountable, and all to the finish line together.
Great.
So self-awareness, number one.
Yep.
Two is ownership, right? So there's that level of self-awareness, but if you're not taking full ownership of that good, bad, and ugly, you got nothing, because self-awareness doesn't change unless you own where your ugly is. Again, most people will say, yeah, I know I do that. Or, there's the funny controller protector who's like, oh, I know I'm a jerk sometimes, just, you got to deal with it. That's a funny way of protecting ourselves, but it's not ownership, right? That's a protective shield. And so when we can actually own it, and say, yeah, I can be a jerk sometime, and I'm really sorry about that. Or recognizing when you say something that didn't land like you wanted it to, and just being able to say, hey, that obviously did not work, and that shut somebody down. Let me rephrase that, or let me ask what that just did to you. And now again, you're having a new conversation, and everyone continues to bring their best self to the table, versus having half your management or leadership team checking out, having your employees walk out of a meeting saying, gosh, my boss is just so out of touch. When you can stop and be real and be a human, now you've got something to work with. So once you have self-awareness and ownership, now we can start the ego management process. The ego management process is getting conscious, getting curious, being able to say, what was my part? Whether it's 1% or 97%, what is my part? I cannot take more than 100% of any situation on. And so when you can start to own your part, again, even if it's 1%, if someone can manage their ego in a room and say, hey, you know what? My part is, I should have sent an email before this meeting to prepare all of you for what we were going to talk about. That could have stopped, maybe, let's say, someone lashing out because they weren't prepared for a topic that was heavy and heated that they wanted to be prepared for. That 1% doesn't change someone else's bad behavior, but it gives them permission to say, yeah, that would have helped me. And now they can manage their ego back. And again, you have a new conversation to be had. And so again, that ownership component of ego management is key. From there, once we get those three things in place, you naturally start to see more productive communication, more alignment, more accountability. And that's really the ultimate goal, is to get a team of accountable, aligned contributors that everybody's getting to the finish line at the same time, same pace, and we all win.
So it sounds like you have a program that follows this framework, and it's delivered in a finite period of time, or is it an ongoing type of program? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so most organizations, it's built to be at least a minimum of 6 months. So a lot of organizations will put cohorts through and management teams, and from there, that 6 months often will lead to more, leadership coaching. So it can be partnered with just group workshops where we open up, more diverse conversations of that human side of the business, or they can add in some individual coaching along with it. So usually it's a combination of both group workshops, group discussions, along with I have a program of videos. There's about 60 videos involved in a 400-page workbook of applicable exercises, tools you can walk away with immediately. Every day you can apply this if you choose to. It's a simple program. My whole thing is, none of us have a lot of time. No one's going to sit down and change their life, drastically tomorrow. So I made this work as simple as possible. Again, normalizing everyday situations, topics, and, behaviors that we all do. So really it takes 10 minutes a day or an hour a week, I say, and that's where people will start to transform their consciousness, their awareness, and really make their impact.
Is that a separate program that goes with the coaching? Is it go together, or is it separate? How do you sell it separately, or?
So,
Yes.
all of my executive coaching, management coaching, any one-on-one coaching obviously gets access to it because it is a
Right.
tool that reference all the time. As far as the academy goes, it is all packaged together. It's a package of the 6-month program, access to the course with the workbook, along with the group workshops. A lot of it is customized. So there's kind of the standard package, which is the group workshops, the videos and the workbook. Some, daily text messages we call mindful motivations, and, just the simple little things that make the program work as a standalone. Where I find most organizations, depending on which level of leadership they have, depending on what they're looking to accomplish, they will usually upgrade and put some individual coaching in, add the 360 assessment for everybody, and really get that whole cohort moving drastically. So come the end of the 6 month, there is a massive shift in communication and accountability and alignment that's very, very present.
Let's talk about how not being self-aware of your ego and managing it really can sabotage your success as a business owner. What are some things that you commonly see? What are the behaviors that become really problematic? And, let's say we're dealing with someone who's pretty mature and they've been doing some of this stuff for a very long time. They're an executive and it's difficult to change these things. So, what do you see and paint a picture of maybe a common problem or a case or something like that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Let me identify quickly the 3 egos types, because I think then we can share similar or simple problems within each one, because they're all very slightly different. You've got the complier ego. The complier ego is motivated by being liked. It wants to be approved, validated, have permission. Its ultimate goal is it's people first, task second. And so it really doesn't want to rock the boat. It doesn't like conflict. It doesn't like difficult conversations. And so with that in mind, where their strengths are is people. They're warm, they're caring, they're inviting, they're empathetic, they're good team builders. Unfortunately, what happens is because they, that ego unconsciously wants to be liked and not rock the boat, they tend to have that passiveness in them. So they may use an example of if they're at the executive level, it could be where it becomes either my way or the highway, or it's like, do what you need to do. So it's the extreme. A lot of times what happens is do what you need to do. This is what we want to do. This is the goal. Go after it. You guys all got it. Really kind of high level, pretty fluffy instruction and direction. In their head, it's very clear. I just asked them to do X, Y, and Z, and I wanted it done by this date. Unfortunately, that got lost in translation. And so usually what happens, then they go to the aggressive, right? They'll start real passive, nonchalant. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's been 3 weeks. We still don't have this. I need this right now. And I need it yesterday. And people are like, whoa, that's not what we thought. So there's a lot of confusion within that type of leadership.
Okay.
So really working on getting them more direct and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Then you got the extreme side of that, which is the opposite side of that, which is the controller. The controller is passionate, driven, focused on results. They're task first, people second. So they tend to micromanage. They tend to know exactly what they want to do and when to do it and how to do it. My way or the highway, fast energy, get on the train or we're going to run you over kind of stuff. Now, people want to follow them, but a lot of times their energy doesn't land. And so they usually leave people behind. So this leader needs to slow down. Otherwise, again, they can come across as too intense, too aggressive. People don't even know what they're asking because it's so, not so high level, but it's so much further than where people are at because they've already thought through it. They see the results, they see the finish line, and they wanted it done yesterday, even though they just thought of the plan this morning. And so being able to really slow down, learn to translate and communicate effectively the directions and the expectations, and making sure those expectations are realistic. Otherwise, that perfectionist can kick in. And typically what happens is this leader tends to be at the finish line alone, or they're cleaning up everybody's messes because they don't have time to train and retrain and delegate effectively. So they get really annoyed and they think no one's as good as they are, which is not a good place to be when you are running a team. And then you got the protector ego. The protector, depending if their subcategory is complier or controller, they can come across as either very passive or very aggressive. Ultimately, it's an arrogant energy that can come with them. The reason for is the protector is actually the part of all of us that is grounded. It's where our values live. It's where our courageous truth lives. It's where fairness lives. Like, we do the right thing for everybody involved, not just for me. Unfortunately, because of that solid foundation, it can come across as sometimes too black and white, too stubborn, too aggressive when we're attached to our way. We're motivated by being right, which means if we're not right, we have no worth or value. So we constantly feel like we have to prove ourselves and, fight for our stance, fight for our position, even though there's so much gray in majority of topics. Teaching this one how to really find gray so they don't come across as aggressive, as the narcissist, as, they just can't listen, or they're too arrogant. They think they're better than everybody. That's very, very unintentional energy that the protector brings. And so those are the common things that we see.
Okay. So we've got these three types. Let's just say they're all at play on a leadership team. Mm-hmm. And let's imagine there's three people on the leadership team, senior leadership team, and we've got one of each type. How do they sabotage I guess, do we talk about each one of them and how they sabotage the success of the people beneath them? Or should we talk about how do they work together to not sabotage? These are both interesting questions and directions we could go. And maybe we can do both, but.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, the most well-structured person uses all three. So if you have an organization that has all three, you're hitting every ego out there, which is really, really balanced. Mm-hmm. It's really what you want. So that's not a bad thing. Unfortunately, what happens where the sabotage comes into play is that they talk different languages. Yeah. So the frustration can be real when you're talking big topics, difficult changes, transformation that needs to happen within the organization or within the products or whatever. Big conversations, talking new languages, different languages can really make an executive team butt heads, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the biggest thing for a team that is well-rounded, which is what we all want, that diversity that makes us great, we have to learn to talk a new language. And so when we can learn to talk a language that the controller, protector, and complier egos can all hear, now we can realign. So the number one thing is that egos do is it forces us onto our own island. And so a lot of times what happens, if you have a controller protector, they will typically be more of the louder, the aggressor, discussion conversers. And so when they're having a conversation, it can sound pretty intense. To those two people, it might not be intense at all. They don't even really care. They're actually kind of enjoying it. They're riffing. Now it can turn to where it's intense and ugly and resentful quickly. One of them is going to shut down in order for the relationship to stay alive. So that's usually a common pattern. If you have a complier that's part of that three, they're either one going to play the mediator role, which is exhausting emotionally for them, or two, they aren't going to feel they can ever give their true, honest feedback to this party of two because they tend to talk louder, faster, and more aggressively than they are comfortable with. And so again, just knowing the dynamics of the egos at your leadership team really allows you to see the space differently and to make sure you're inviting the best value and wisdom from all three parties to really make sure that they're all contributing, because otherwise most likely you're losing one and one or two of them are kind of dominating over the vision and the plan. I do a lot of co-founder coaching, and what that typically is the normal pattern is there's been someone shut down, resentment has been made, and then even the controller and the protector, they start getting resentful for the person that's not speaking up because they know that they're missing out their value, but in their head, they're thinking it's the other person's lack of ability to speak up versus their ability of shutting people down, right? And so again, ownership, they're both wrong. They're not one ego tactic is better than the other. They just look very different. One's more aggressive and one's more passive. So a lot of times the complier might say, oh, well, I'm not as bad as the controller. Well, if we're going to look at it like that on the people side, yes. But as a leader, it's still just as bad because there's just as much drama that comes with that one. It just looks different.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So I work with a lot of family businesses, and some of them, or at least in the past, oftentimes they were husband and wife. Now it's typically like father and son, or parent and child. But let's just take the situation where it's husband and wife, and they're working together, and they've got probably different ego. What do you want to call it? Structure, ego orientation,
ego mindsets. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ego mindset. Okay. And that's what brought them together, is that they're complementary. Are they likely to be the same ego mindset at home as they are at work, or might it completely change? I could imagine that at work, the man is kind of running the show and he's the controller type, and that at home he's more the complier because he knows that like the wife runs the household, and that's kind of going with traditional gender roles. But does this convolute things when they try and unwind what's going on, because they're confused about in their business, like, are they family first relating to as husband and wife in the family business, or are they business partners? And does it change when they get home? I mean, I imagine this becomes intertwined and can get tangled into a knot in certain situations. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes and no. I think the thing with the ego shows up in every aspect of our life, whether we're talking about our marriage, whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about friendships or our parenting or our church, whatever it is, right? Like our ego shows up there, good, bad, or ugly. And I think family businesses, you talk about ego stuff, right? Because the ego comes out under pressure, stress, emotion, attachment, like anything that triggers an emotional response, love, hate, like all of it. And when you think about a family business, most people go to work and their family life and their kind of that stuff gets to be left behind. When you go to a family business, that stuff is part of the dynamics. And so I think the ego work is so much more important in those relationships because you have to identify and open up a level of vulnerability that most families don't have, right? We kind of butt heads and then we love each other better for worse. Like this is just who we are. And we've learned to talk in these dysfunctional, crazy, chaotic ways. And it just works for us. Not saying it's healthy or it's functional, but that's kind of how most family dynamics, we don't really talk about the big, heavy stuff. We kind of push it under the rug and just let it go. Unfortunately, if that's the way you communicate at home and you're running a business together, you're probably communicating like that at home or at work too. I will say, I think there's just as many women that are controllers as there are men compliers. And so I wouldn't fall into the trap that, at home, husband's more complying, woman's more controlling, and at work, he's more controlling. I actually find that it can be the opposite. Yeah,
good point. I've seen
quite often. Yeah. And that's good, right? Like I have several clients who run businesses and there's either both female or male and female or just a spouse as well. And I think you see both. I have just as many controller women as I do controller men. With that being said, I think the importance of a husband and wife or a parent-child transition within an organization is learning those communication styles. Because what happens, not only do you have the pressure of keeping a healthy family dynamic and the finances healthy there and the, human relationships thriving in that environment, you also have now this world of work where you have the financial pressures, you have the employee pressures, you have, the bottom line and the success and the systems and the processes and all these things that can stress you out too. Most people get a break from their spouse or their family member because, again, it's separated. And when you don't get that break, now you have double the pressure, right? Not only does this pressure affect us here, but it's infecting us at home as well. And so being able to truly have that third party, I'm sure you do a ton of this type of coaching where you start talking about kind of those external unconscious behaviors that really impact how they're showing up, not just at home, but at work and how it's impacting the decisions they make today, right? You're annoyed with your husband because he didn't clean the bathroom and you go to work, you're still annoyed with him. And now he's your business partner, right? Like that conversation has to be weeded out, and there has to be some level of humor that goes with that. And I think that's one thing that comes with ego management. When you could start to identify the ego, one, you can call out these unconscious behaviors and tactics that typically our families get the worst self of us most of the time. And so when we start bringing that to the table, we no longer get defensive. We're able to say, okay, yeah, I know I'm doing that thing, I'm sorry. Or they can, we can consciously say, hey, honey, I feel the pressure today. I think you need to go take a break. Where if our other business partners say that, we might be like, no, I'm good. And we just put on our game face, right? Where when it's our wife or our husband, it's much harder to do that. And we just bring our emotion because they can handle it. And we know they won't leave us. Unfortunately, it's not always true, but in our head, that's what we tell ourselves. So yeah, I think it's transparency to a whole nother level than what a traditional business relationship would look like.
So let's talk a little bit more about what that transparency is, and let me frame it. I guess I've been thinking about a question, which is, you can't go into a situation and start talking about ego management. I imagine people will be like, who is this Christie Garcia? What
is she talking about?
She's crazy. Like she's got some whack idea here. And
right.
So what, let's talk in terms of sales language. What are the pain points that bring someone to you and not some other leadership development coach or course? Or, I mean, what are the signs? What are the things that you're seeing that you can say, like, I can help you address or maybe even fix this because this is my sweet spot? I'm really because people don't think in terms of, he's got a huge ego, or we've got a Complier ego. We got a, they think in terms of, we're not listening to each other, or we're not getting along. Or so tell us what some of those things are.
Yeah, I think it's the traditional symptoms of business. When you think about, if we're talking just, management and leadership, feeling overwhelmed, questioning whether or not you're good enough for the job. Are you doing a good enough, job at home, at work? Getting at the end of the day, you're just not feeling fulfilled. When you look at the team, feeling like your team's not engaged. They're not getting to the finish line. No one's getting projects done. The delegation's not there. There's no time. There's drama within the business, just in the communication and the collaboration, or maybe lack of communication and collaboration. Like those are all symptoms of the ego. And so, I think the biggest thing for me is fast growing organizations wanting a modern approach. If you're just looking to check a leadership box, I'm not the company. Like, we're coming in to transform some behaviors and the culture of an organization and a belief system. So if you're looking for something different and fresh, and seeking out some of that growth for the long haul, not just this short-term investment, again, to check a box, then I think that's where we can really make a difference in productive communication. Really getting a team 100% engaged, and as an individual contributor and as a leader within an organization, right? And so whether you're wanting to learn to be the we within your team as a leader, a lot of times as a leader, we struggle to shift to the we. And so keeping that we mindset open, being able to get everybody to the finish line, create that alignment so people are on the same page. I hear all the time from leaders, I just don't think my team's on the same page. I just feel like we're all scattered. We all got different goals. We all got different visions. We're going in the same direction, but it doesn't feel aligned. So, creating a real strong alignment, real open communication and collaboration, especially in this world of, virtual workspaces, being able to build a level of trust and collaboration, even if we're across the screen, building in some of the, I think the biggest thing that I work with lately is teaching managers and leaders how to accept feedback at a level that is so incredibly effective and productive that it's not personal, and now they just change it. When you start to recognize your own ego, it is so much easier to hear feedback from your team members, to then be able to recognize that their response to you is not personal. So I just need to get curious with them, right? If they come to you saying, my boss is too It's too demanding, giving me too much work. I'm overwhelmed. Well, an example would be if that is coming from an employee that's a complier protector, all they want to do is please you. And if you continue to put stuff on their plate, because they're going to continue to say, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And now all of a sudden they're so overwhelmed. That overwhelm might only be because they took a day off and they came back to a million emails and they just need to get ahead of it. But now they fired off because their ego said, you know what, my boss is just overworking me. I cannot control this. Where if you give them 4 hours or 6 hours and then you respond, I would bet 9 out of 10 times that employee is no longer stressed out. And they're like, oh no, I was just really stressed out in the moment. I'm good now. And so again, learning how to process what other people's behaviors are and mindsets so that then you can respond to them with an intentional, action or belief or communication that will actually keep the relationship more productive and make it more meaningful. So where everybody feels connected and engaged, builds that trust. So team members actually feel like you care about them. And it doesn't take a lot of time and our energy. It does take time and energy, but not a lot. Where I think a lot of times when we're in the ego mindset, it's like, I don't have time to deal about their feelings. I don't have time to have that conversation all the time. I don't have time to handhold. I don't have time to train over and over and over again. That's the ego saying I'm too busy to take care of the people on my team. And when we can shift that mindset within an organization, you truly can start to move mountains so much faster without all the fire drills, without all the chaos. And just everybody gets to enjoy it. I think that's one of my favorite parts about the job. About month 3 of this work, I start to hear, I just really enjoy my job again. And that's a fun, successful win for anybody who's investing in their team. So, I think, again, it's just a modern approach.
That's great. Christie, in addition to yourself, who are some of the thought leaders in this space that you admire, look up to, read, listen to? Tell us about those people.
I think everybody talks some level of ego. I think not too many use the word ego directly like I do. But as far as, talking about truth and vulnerability and just taking ownership, I think there's a lot of them out there. Some of my favorite, I love Brené Brown's work. She was a changer for me. Yeah, she's one that really helped me recognize my ego, shame, vulnerability. Those were words that really attached to my ego. And so learning, the scary things really are the vulnerable things. Starting your own business, falling in love, making a change. Like that's just vulnerability at its finest. And when you're willing to not look at the emotions that come with that as weak and look at it as courage and strength, it really can transform things. So I think her work is incredible, especially if you have a controller protector ego who sees emotion weakly as a weak thing.
You said her name very fast, so let me just repeat it for the audience. It's Brené Brown. And I've had difficulty getting into her work and even listening to her TED Talks. And I have. And I don't know if it's something in my ego that's controlling or something that's blocking it. In my mind, I've reluctant to say this, but I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. I've said to myself, you know what? I think her message seems to appeal more to women than men. But then I meet some male colleagues who are coaches who swear by her work. But like for some reason, I just didn't find it that accessible or that engaging to me. But she's highly respected, highly regarded, and what's unique about her, I think, is that she's a researcher first, right? So she's done the hard lifting and the homework to come to her body of work. High respect for her.
Absolutely. That's what I love about leadership development. There's so many great people doing great things out there. If you really want to break down our messages underneath, we're all probably doing pretty much the same stuff, right?
Of course.
Different messaging, different delivery. And I think that's the beauty of it. One person's, delivery can resonate. And I think it goes back to the ego types, depending on what your ego is, you resonate to her or you don't. And I think that's how we filter all of the world around us. We either resonate with someone's natural message or we need it broken down for us to hear it and it actually land viscerally for us. And so I think that's a really great example that she's not for everybody. I think she has great research, which is what my brain liked about her. Like, give me some hardcore black and white facts,
Right.
So I can handle it and then process it emotionally. But then, I think there's your Eckhart Tolle's, who I love his work too, because that is the softer stuff. That is the slow down, breathe. It took me, actually, I could still only get about 10 to 15 minutes into his Audible book.
Yeah, me too.
Because I'm super bored, but I just need 10 to 15 minutes of his voice to calm me down and slow me down and get me into that power of now, right? And I think that is where anytime you're learning something new or listening to one of these, leadership books out there or business books, whatever you're listening to, parenting book, take what you can process from it. Don't try to, do it because someone said it's great. Take what it is, put it in the background. Like, your brain is processing and what it needs to take in. Your subconscious brain in the moment is judging what it's saying if you don't like it. If your ego doesn't like the tone of voice, or doesn't like something it said, or it doesn't feel like it's talking to you, or maybe it's talking to you completely, the ego's like, nope, that's not me, that's someone else. And it's going to shut it down, right? And I think when we can recognize that about the ego and then just stay curious, say, okay, I'm not going to give it my full attention, but I'm going to put it in the background. So subconsciously, my brain is going to hear this and it will process it. I think that's the beauty of learning, education, awareness. When we start to process new information, stay curious without judgment, we can actually take bits and pieces of anybody who's delivering anything and find some form of value out of it.
Christie, this has been a wonderful conversation with you. And so I'm going to wrap up that people can find you at mindfulchoicecoaching.com. And that's where they'll learn about your coaching programs and packaged products, courses. Yes. Yes.
Actually, I'm going to change that to Mindful Choice Academy. It's a little shorter.
Okay.
Type in mindfulchoiceacademy.com.
Fantastic. And it's Christie with an IE. This has been a really interesting conversation. A week after I released an episode on how to listen, I love the two of these episodes together. I definitely want to share this with one of my clients who I think this will speak really well to. So thanks so much for being on the show. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope it's made you think a little bit more about how are you showing up in your business? How mindful are you? How aware, self-aware are you of your ego? What's your ego style? And what are some of the conflicts or challenges or issues that are going on in your business that might be sabotaging your success? So you heard it here on the Disruptive Successor Show. Please give us a good rating on your listening podcast application of choice. And remember to share this with others. Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.